The wind whispered across the canyon like a warning from the past, soft, ancient, and watchful. For centuries, the Red Cliffs had held secrets of battles, romances, betrayals, and miracles. But on this particular dusk, the sky burned a copper orange that looked almost like fire melting into night, as if nature itself anticipated something life-changing. Cale Lone River, a young Apache scout barely 23 winters old, guided his Mustang along the narrow trail. His dark hair flowed behind him, tied with leather, and his eyes, sharp, steady, carrying the weight of a man who had already seen more loss than most elders, scanned the landscape with instinctive vigilance. He traveled alone tonight. By choice. Because the silence made it easier to breathe. Because the memories that clawed at him during the day grew quieter under the rising stars. Because since the raid that had taken his younger brother 2 months ago, Cale had been restless, drifting from patrols to escort missions to solitary scouting, hoping that movement would dull the ache in his chest. But pain, he had learned, traveled well. And it never got tired. He tugged lightly on the reins as his horse stopped to drink from a shallow stream winding through the canyon floor. This land, untamed and severe to outsiders, felt like a living companion to Cale. The rocks spoke if you listened long enough. The wind carried messages. The earth held memory. Some men saw wilderness. Cale saw spirit. He knelt beside his horse, scooped water into his hands, and splashed his face. The coolness shocked his skin awake, and he exhaled a long breath that clouded faintly in the cooling air. Night was approaching. He should find shelter soon. He climbed back onto his Mustang, nudging it forward, when suddenly, a scream tore through the canyon. Not an echo. Not an animal. Human. Female. Raw. Terrified. Cale froze, muscles locking, senses firing sharper than any blade. Another cry followed, high-pitched, panicked, cracking in the middle as if the air itself trembled around it. Someone was in danger. He didn't think. He moved. His Mustang surged forward, hooves pounding against stone, as Cale leaned low over its neck. The canyon twisted in tight curves, narrowing into rocky corridors where light struggled to pass. But he followed the sound as surely as one would track smoke in the wind. The third scream was weaker. Choked. Not far now. Cale pulled his horse short at a split in the path. Dismounting silently, he scanned the rugged terrain. Then he saw them. 3 men surrounding a young white woman backed against the canyon wall. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, her breath frantic, her eyes wide with the kind of fear that carved itself permanently into his soul. The men were outlaws. He recognized their makeshift gear, mismatched guns, and the swagger of men who preyed on the vulnerable. They hadn't noticed him yet. Good. Cale's hand slid toward the knife strapped across his chest. But before he could act, one outlaw reached for the woman, grabbing her by the wrist so violently she stumbled and nearly fell. She cried out again, this time in pure desperation. And that was it. Cale stepped forward. Let her go! The canyon amplified his voice, deep and unyielding. The men jerked around. The woman's breath hitched sharply, hope and disbelief mixing in her eyes. One outlaw squinted at Cale's clothing, the leather bands on his arms, the feathers braided into his hair. A damn Apache! He sneered. Mind your business! Cale didn't move. Let her go! The men exchanged looks, uneasy now. Even outlaws respected, or feared, the uncanny accuracy of Apache warriors. Still, one lifted his gun. Cale acted first. He lunged, closing the distance in a heartbeat. His knife flashed under the fading sun, knocking the man's pistol from his grip before he could even aim. Another swung at Cale with the butt of his revolver, but Cale ducked and drove his shoulder into the man's ribs, knocking the wind out of him. The third outlaw pulled the woman between them like a shield. Cale's jaw tightened. Let her go! he warned again. Your fight is with me. The outlaw hesitated, then shoved the woman toward him, and fled down the canyon path, with the others sprinting behind him. Cale didn't chase. The woman collapsed to her knees, shaking so hard her dress quivered around her. He approached slowly, hands open, careful not to startle her. You're safe, he said softly. They won't come back. She gasped, lifted her head, then flinched at his shadow looming over her. It's all right, he repeated. I won't harm you. Her breathing stuttered, shallow and uneven. Cale knelt several feet away, leaving space, lowering himself so he wasn't towering over her. She was young, maybe 19, with pale skin reddened by fear and dust. Her hair was tangled from struggle, her palms scraped, her dress torn. But her eyes, blue, trembling, full of a terror that wasn't fading. I, she tried, but her voice cracked. Tears spilled rapidly, surprising her as much as him. Cale extended a small leather water pouch. She stared at it. At him. At the ground. Finally, with trembling hands, she took it. But her fingers brushed his skin for just a moment, and she gasped as if burned, jerking her hand back. Cale froze. Not offended. Concerned. Her response wasn't about him. It was fear of men. All men. The realization hit him almost instantly, intense, heavy. She had never been with a man. In any way. Not even near one without fear overtaking her. Whatever her past held, she had been sheltered, protected too tightly, or harmed emotionally in ways deeper than any physical wound. Cale softened his voice. You're trembling because you're still scared, he said quietly. Not because of me. I understand. The woman's lips parted, but no words emerged. She tried again. I've never. She swallowed hard, trembling. I've never been close to a man before. Her confession poured out like something trapped for too long. Cale wasn't shocked. But he felt something twist gently inside him. Compassion, sorrow, protectiveness. I won't hurt you, he said again, softer than before. A tear slid down her cheek. She wiped it quickly, embarrassed. I know, she whispered. She didn't know, not really, but something in his steady presence made her want to believe it. What is your name? Cale asked gently. She hesitated. Lydia, she whispered. Lydia Harris. Cale nodded. I am Cale. Lone River. She inhaled shakily, clutching the water pouch like a lifeline. Thank you. Cale, can you stand? He asked, rising slowly so she could track every movement. She tried. Her knees buckled. Cale stepped forward instinctively, but stopped himself at arm's length away, offering his hand only when she met his eyes. It's all right, he assured her. Just take my hand. Only if you choose. Lydia looked at his hand as if it was something sacred, gentle, patient, steady. Slowly she reached out. Her fingers touched his palm. He curled his hand around hers, but lightly, carefully, as though holding the wing of a fragile bird. He lifted her effortlessly. Lydia wobbled. Cale steadied her, not by grabbing, but by placing a warm, grounding hand near her elbow, barely touching. Thank you, she whispered again, voice thin as paper. You're safe, he repeated. But safety wasn't enough tonight. She was freezing from shock, trembling violently. Cale guided her to a smooth rock near his horse and prepared a small fire, moving with quiet efficiency. As sparks caught and flames rose, Lydia wrapped her arms around herself, still shaking. He draped a woven blanket over her shoulders, carefully, so she wouldn't feel trapped. As warmth seeped in, she exhaled a shuddering breath. Then her eyes rose to Cale again, and for the first time since he arrived, she really looked at him. Studied him. Noticed him. You saved my life, she whispered. And I would again, Cale replied. Silence fell. Not uncomfortable. Not tense. Just soft. Like the space between two people who had collided by fate rather than chance. Cale sat across the fire, giving her space. Lydia watched him, cautiously, curiously, her fear slowly untangling into a different emotion. Not trust, not yet, but the beginning of something gentler. I shouldn't be alive, she murmured, staring into the flames. You should, Cale said firmly. And you are? She looked at him, and something fragile flickered in her eyes. Hope. Night thickened around them, the fire casting warm orange arcs across the canyon walls. Lydia sat curled beneath the blanket Cale had given her, her eyes flicking between the flames and the quiet, watchful Apache sitting across from her. Cale tended the fire occasionally, feeding it small branches so it wouldn't flare too bright or too hot. He kept the light gentle, calming, something she could anchor herself to. Every time the fire popped, Lydia startled a little. Not obvious. But Cale noticed. He noticed everything. He had learned long ago that fear had a rhythm, a breath pattern, a vibration in the hands. Hers trembled like leaf shadows in wind. Did they harm you? Cale asked quietly. Lydia shook her head, a tiny movement. No. They didn't get the chance. You came too fast. He nodded, relieved, though he didn't show it. The canyon might have been silent, but inside, the knowledge unclenched a tight knot he hadn't realized he held. And before they found you? He asked gently. Were you hurt? She swallowed. Just shaken. I fell when they chased me. But I'm all right. Her voice was fragile, but it held a small spark, faint but alive. Cale leaned back slightly, giving her space. Then we are both grateful. A soft breath escaped her, something close to a laugh, but not quite. More like a sob's distant cousin. You talk differently than anyone I've met, she murmured. Cale raised one brow, amused. Different, good or different, concerning. She blinked, surprised he cracked humor. Good, she said. Then, after a pause, surprisingly good. The corners of Cale's lips lifted, not fully, just enough to soften his expression. Lydia drew the blanket tighter around her. The fear was still there in her eyes, but beneath it, something new was beginning to form. A fragile curiosity. You said earlier you'd never been close to a man, Cale said softly. Not even to speak with one? Lydia's cheeks flushed pink in the firelight. She stared at the ground. My father kept me indoors, she whispered. Always. We lived on a ranch miles from town. He said men were dangerous. Said I needed protection. That the world would swallow me whole if I wandered. Cale listened without judgment, his face calm. He wasn't cruel, she continued quickly. Just overprotective. After my mother died, he got worse. He said he couldn't lose me too. So I grew up, sheltered. Never danced at town socials. Never rode past the property lines. Never met anyone except the ranch hands, and they were told not to look at me or speak unless spoken to. She pulled her knees closer, ashamed, as if her innocence was something to apologize for. I wasn't scared of men until tonight, she whispered. Cale nodded slowly. Fear doesn't grow from nothing, he said gently. It grows from rules. From the ways you were taught the world works, even when those teachings are wrong. Lydia blinked at him, surprised by the insight. Cale's tone softened even more. You are not weak because you were sheltered. And you weren't foolish to run when danger came. You survived. That takes strength. Her breath hitched, eyes warming with tears. She tried to blink away. Most people wouldn't say that, she whispered. Then most people don't understand courage. That was when Lydia looked at him differently, not as a stranger who had saved her, not as a warrior, not as a man, but as someone safe. Someone steady. Someone who saw her. She exhaled slowly. "Thank you," she murmured. Cale dipped his head in acknowledgement. "You are welcome." But Lydia wasn't done. She looked at him across the fire with vulnerable honesty. "When I said I'd never been close to a man, I meant it. Not even standing this near." She lifted her gaze apologetically. "I'm sorry if it makes me seem childish." Cale shook his head firmly. "There is nothing childish about innocence, and nothing shameful in not knowing what you were never allowed to learn." Her eyes softened. Silence wrapped around them again, soft, like a blanket of dusk. Cale stood after a moment, retrieving something from his saddlebag. Lydia tensed instinctively, but relaxed when she saw it. A small pouch of dried berries and a piece of cornbread wrapped in cloth. He handed it to her. "Eat," he said gently. "You need your strength." Her stomach growled loudly, so loud she startled, and covered her face in embarrassment. Cale pretended not to hear. She took the food and ate in small, shaky bites. Halfway through, she paused. "Aren't you eating?" she asked softly. "I ate earlier," Cale said. She frowned. "Even so, you should have some." She broke the cornbread in two, hands trembling, voice unsteady, but offering all the same. It was the smallest gesture, but to Cale, it spoke volumes. He accepted the piece she gave him and ate it respectfully. The canyon was quiet except for the crackle of fire, Lydia's breathing, and distant coyote calls. After she finished eating, her exhaustion caught up to her, and her eyelids grew heavy. "You can sleep," Cale said gently. "I'll keep watch." Lydia stiffened. "You won't leave?" "Only when the sun rises," he said. "Not before." "And you'll stay awake?" "All night." Her shoulders loosened slightly. But then, hesitation. Fear. A question heavy with vulnerability. "What if I wake up and I panic?" she asked quietly. "I don't always think straight. Sometimes fear takes over before my mind catches up." Cale's voice warmed, gentle reassurance wrapped in strength. "If you wake afraid," he said softly, "I will speak calmly. Move slowly. Keep distance. Give you space. Whatever helps you breathe again." She stared at him, eyes glistening. "You're very kind," she whispered. Cale shook his head. "I am simply doing what any person should." "Most wouldn't," she said with certainty. Cale didn't argue. Instead, he added more wood to the fire and spread an additional blanket on the sand a few feet away from her, far enough for her comfort, close enough for protection. Lydia laid down slowly, still wrapped in the first blanket. Her eyes remained open for a long time, watching Cale's silhouette against the flames. He sat cross-legged, spine straight, eyes scanning the canyon, alert but calm. "You're really not going to sleep?" she asked drowsily. "No." "Why?" "Because you deserve a night without fear." Her breath caught. She didn't respond. Couldn't. Moments later, despite trying to remain awake, her eyes fluttered closed. Her breathing steadied. Her trembling eased. Cale watched her sleep, peace returning little by little to her expression. For the first time that day, something in him softened too. He didn't know why he cared so much, not yet. But he knew this. The canyon had brought her into his life for a reason. And fate wasn't done with him. Not by a long shot. Lydia woke slowly, very slowly, as if her mind was rising from water instead of sleep. The blanket around her was warm, and the air held the clean chill of early dawn. For a long moment, she didn't move. She listened. The soft crackle of dying embers. The distant rustle of wind weaving through canyon brush. And somewhere close, steady breathing. She opened her eyes. Cale sat exactly where he had been last night, cross-legged, alert, watching the mouth of the canyon with the quiet intensity of a guardian. The early light painted gold along his cheekbones, and his posture was strong, almost carved from the morning itself. He didn't look tired. He didn't even look like he'd blinked. Lydia pushed herself up slightly. Cale turned, not suddenly, not in a way that might startle her, but gently, acknowledging her awakening with a nod. "Good morning," he said softly. She swallowed, surprised by how safe she felt waking up like this. "You stayed awake the whole night?" she whispered. "Yes," he answered simply. "There was no danger." Still, Lydia's heart tightened. "You didn't have to stay awake for me." Cale's gaze softened. "You were frightened. Anyone would have done the same." She lifted her eyes slowly. "No," she said with a quiet honesty that carried the weight of her life's years. "They wouldn't." Cale didn't argue, though he could have. Instead, he simply rose to his feet and walked to his saddlebag. Lydia watched him, hesitation in the way she sat, curiosity in the way her head tilted slightly. He returned with a handful of wild berries and a small piece of dried meat. "You should eat before we travel," he said. "You lost much strength yesterday." She blinked. "Travel?" Cale nodded. "We should move before the men return with reinforcements. They fled too easily. That means cowardice, or plans. We must not still be here when they find courage." Lydia paled. He noticed. Immediately, he knelt beside her, but not close. Close enough that she could see him clearly, far enough not to crowd her. "You will be safe with me," he said softly. Her lips parted. A breath escaped. She nodded slowly, trusting him in a way she didn't fully understand. Cale stood and brought his Mustang forward, then extended a hand, not touching her, not assuming anything, just offering. Lydia hesitated. Not out of fear, but because she realized something strange. She wanted to take his hand. The thought startled her, but she reached out anyway. Her palm pressed into his, warm and steady. His hand wrapped around hers, gentle but strong, guiding her to her feet. The blanket slipped from her shoulders, and he caught it before it fell completely, placing it carefully across her arms. "You may ride the horse," Cale said. "I will lead on foot." "But the ground is rocky," she protested. "Shouldn't you?" He shook his head quietly. "A warrior walks when someone who has suffered must ride." Her chest tightened. Her father had never spoken to her like that. No man ever had. They began their journey, the canyon narrowing around them. Lydia rode slowly, Cale's hand on the Mustang's reins as he guided them along the uneven path. He walked with the smooth, watchful grace of someone who had spent his entire life navigating the wild. Every now and then, Lydia studied him silently, the way he moved, the way he scanned the horizon, the steadiness in his breathing. She wondered how someone could carry so much calm. After nearly an hour, Lydia finally spoke. "Why were you here yesterday?" she asked softly. Cale didn't look up. "Scouting." "For what?" He paused, then answered with measured honesty. "Peace." The word caught her off guard. "Peace?" she repeated. "Here? In this wilderness?" "Yes," Cale said quietly. "Peace must be guarded. Like a fire in the night." She stared at him a long moment, absorbing the truth of that. They walked in silence until the canyon widened into a vast spread of open plains. Morning light spilled across the earth like molten gold. Lydia inhaled deeply. The air smelled like dust, sage, and something crisp she had no name for. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Cale glanced at her, one corner of his mouth lifting just slightly. "It is." Then he added, "Most people cannot see it." "See what?" "The life in it," Cale said. She considered that. And slowly, She began to see it too. The way sunlight shimmered along the grasses. The way the wind carried the scent of distant rain. The way the world felt bigger, far bigger, than the tiny box of fear she had lived in her entire life. After a few minutes, Lydia asked another question, quietly, unsure if she should. "Cale, how did you learn to be so calm?" He didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened, just slightly. "My brother," he said finally. "He taught me." Lydia leaned forward, listening intently. "You had a brother?" Cale nodded once. "He was younger. Quiet. Gentle. He saw good in everyone. Too much good." Lydia heard the pain in his voice, the grief buried carefully under each word. "What happened to him?" she whispered. Cale's eyes lowered. "He was taken. 2 moons ago." Lydia felt her heart sink. "Taken? By who?" "Raiders," Cale replied. "Not unlike the ones we met yesterday. They attack farms, caravans, anyone who travels alone. We searched for days," he said softly. "We found signs of struggle. Blood. A torn piece of his vest. But no body." She gasped. "So he might still be alive?" Cale's voice grew low, heavy with the weight of hope he didn't dare hold too tightly. "Yes," he said. "He might." Lydia swallowed, sensing the depth of his pain. "I'm so sorry." Cale nodded gently, accepting her sympathy without dismissing it, rare for a man. "It is why I travel alone now," he continued. "Not to escape grief, but to understand it. To become worthy of the brother I loved." The honesty of that struck Lydia deeply. For several minutes, she said nothing, because nothing she could say would measure up. Instead, she simply whispered, "He would be proud of you." Cale's steps faltered for a moment. Just a fraction. She didn't miss it. And in that tiny moment, something shifted between them. Something fragile but real. A connection. Not romantic. Not yet. But profoundly human. He cleared his throat. "We should reach shelter soon." They pressed onward. As the sun climbed higher, a subtle tension returned to Cale's posture, alert, scanning again. Lydia followed his gaze, and noticed faint footprints in the dirt. Her stomach tightened. "Is it them?" she whispered. Cale crouched, touching the prints with 2 fingers. "Yes." Her heart raced. "What do we do?" "Keep moving," he said calmly. "Fear makes bad decisions. We will make good ones." Lydia exhaled shakily. For the next hour, the land stretched before them in quiet waves of dust and grass. Cale moved with ease. Lydia trusted him more with each step. As they reached a small ridge, Cale raised a hand, stopping instantly. Lydia froze. "What is it?" "Riders," he murmured. Her breath caught. "The outlaws?" Cale listened to the distant thunder of hooves, the angle of wind, the faint metal jingle of bridles. "No," he said finally. "Not them." He stepped forward onto the ridge so Lydia could see too. Below them, a wagon caravan. Men, women, children. A traveling family heading west. Lydia's eyes brightened with relief, but Cale's expression remained troubled. "Why do you look worried?" she asked. "Because," Cale said, "good people attract danger too. These lands hold many eyes." Lydia felt her breath tighten again. Cale turned to her. "You must decide," he said. "Do you wish to travel with them? Or continue with me?" The question landed heavier than she expected. Travel with strangers, crowded, unfamiliar, loud, overwhelming? Or continue with the one man she didn't fear? Her heart knew the answer before her voice did. She looked at Cale, steady, strong, safe. "I'll stay with you," she whispered. Cale bowed his head respectfully. "Then I will protect you," he said softly. Wherever this path leads. Lydia's breath trembled. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel alone. Not in her fear. Not in the world. And definitely not in the canyon that had brought her to him.